Welcome to The Beat. I'm Ari Melber, and we are covering this high-stakes confirmation hearing for one of the most important posts in government, the Attorney General. It is a post that has become an obsession for President Trump as he tries to corrupt the DOJ into a political operation that he wants to persecute and indict critics and jail his opposition.
Do you believe it is the president's right and duty to order the investigation or prosecution of his perceived enemies? Yes or no?
I can't answer that yes or no.
Is the Department of Justice that you are running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive.
The Attorney General's client is not the president. It's the American people.
How long do you intend to put up with that Kash Patel character?
That's an extraordinarily obnoxious question, Senator.
Who you are is someone willing to sacrifice everything you once believed in for that title.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer.
Quote, I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer. Well, that lawyer, Todd Blanche, is testifying today partly to try to prove the opposite, that he can now be an independent attorney general and no longer act like what he was, Trump's personal lawyer. So that shift into the present tense sounded like a classic Freudian slip today, where a verbal gaffe or a speech error can actually reveal the true unconscious view under the surface. We've all heard of this. It's the proverbial slip of the tongue that's pretty well known. And as people, we often get interested in these kind of psychologies. If we think someone has blurted their true underlying view from the subconscious out into the world, in this case, that would be, and I'm doing a little Freudian analysis, but you can decide what you think of Blanche, but that would be that if this were a Freudian slip, then Mr. Blanche improperly views his current job as doing whatever Trump wants, as being his lawyer. And I can tell you that even in the perhaps low standards of the Trump era, that is not something Blanche is supposed to admit under oath, fighting to get this job and still win over Senate votes. So with that in mind and him not wanting to sound that way, here's just a little more of that moment as the nominee tried to clean it up.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer, and now I'm the Deputy Attorney General. So I met him as his criminal defense attorney. I'm not sure there's very many people who have ever had a criminal defense attorney who calls that person their friend. I now have a...
Well, let me put it this way. Are you enemies?
No, we're not enemies at all.
Now, as a side note, that was a Republican Senator Kennedy there. He was just trying to help Blanche with those kind of easy, vague questions when that slip came up, whether you think it's significant or not. And nobody thinks the two of them are enemies right now. He was just, of course, picked for this big post. Now, Senate politics are as unpredictable as life and death. The passing of Senator Graham has now left Blanche's confirmation hanging by potentially a single vote. And John Cornyn, who's retiring after Trump led that bid to oust him in a primary, is one of the senators who everyone is watching and who, knowing that, still chose to press Blanche on one of his most controversial stumbles, the now frozen effort to take your taxpayer money and give it to MAGA-allied convicts.
You have said that the weaponization fund is a moot issue. Is that your position?
Yes, it is a moot issue, meaning there is no weaponization fund. The weaponization fund is dead. It's not moving forward.
Is the settlement agreement enforceable as a contract by the parties?
Well, yes, it's an enforceable document. So I suppose if President Trump's counsel sought to enforce it, they potentially could.
Including the weaponization fund?
Well, they could try to enforce the contract.
Blanche's answers there reinforce the Trump legal scam that kind of just blew up and failed. Because the they there are just the Trump representatives, other lawyers. But it's, of course, Trump's other representatives that run the DOJ. And that's why it was such a conflicted deal, which a judge has now halted. But to decode what's happening there, Blanche, on the one hand, is still trying to win over what could be skeptical senators by saying, well, the thing's moot, it's basically over. And yet, ever the Trump lawyer or former Trump lawyer he was also trying to hold the door open a crack to other Trump lawyers restarting this crime fund at a future date by, as he put it, trying to enforce the contract. Now, it matters that Senator Cornyn was the one concerned about this because he's one of the only Republicans that could spike this nomination. You see how close it is. The New York Times story on today's hearing actually led with the exchange you just saw, noting that the, quote, fate of Blanche's nomination as AG remained uncertain after what the Times called a rocky hearing, noting Cornyn raised questions about Blanche's role in creating that fund, and that after the hearing, Cornyn said, I don't have to make a decision now, so I'm not. On the stakes, the article goes on to note what I just reminded you and why that senator matters, that, quote, even a single Republican no vote on the Judiciary Committee would block Mr. Blanche's nomination from consideration by the full Senate, and that could sink his entire confirmation. Now, that's how the Times put it. You take it all together here, and let's just level set. There are many, many issues under the DOJ in the Trump administration. Pam Bondi out pretty quickly. You had the Epstein issues, which also were covered today, and I'll get into with my guests. You have ICE, you have the killings of Americans, you have several losses in the Supreme Court, and yet think about what a bizarre, lawless zone we are in, that the big conflict here between Cornyn and Blanche, and what I just showed you, and the thing that the Times says might even be a part of dooming the nomination, is that even after a court has blocked this whole fund, Mr. Blanche, still fighting to get the job, so in the most reasonable mode he's ever going to be in, is leaving the door open with a court order against it to maybe try to get your taxpayer dollars still rerouted over to some convicts. And that would be funding convicts and perhaps the people who tried to overthrow our democracy. That would be the opposite of law enforcement. A reminder, the job here is to be the top law enforcement officer of the country. With that in mind, I want to bring in Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and Mueller prosecutor, and David Kelly, former SDNY chief. I should note, my former boss back when I practiced law. Both of you know a bit about law enforcement. Andrew, your view on that. We could hit so many issues, but even leaving the door open that way for something this brazen is really quite incriminating. And did you have a view on whether it was a Freudian slip or not?
Well, on the Freudian slip, under most circumstances, I would give somebody who's testifying for that long in this kind of hearing the benefit of the doubt and say it's just a slip. The problem here, and the reason I don't do that, is that we have all of his behavior as Deputy Attorney General and now Acting Attorney General, where he is acting as Donald Trump's counsel. So it's, to me, that is confirmatory of this Freudian slip approach. In terms of the fund and leaving the door open, I thought there was another exchange that directly left that door open because he was asked about whether there were some other funds that the Department of Justice might use to give money to these January 6ers, such as the FTCA, which is a fund that exists. And he did not rule that out. He could have easily said, under my Department of Justice, no funds will be used to go to people on January 6th, or at least the January 6th people who were convicted of violence. But he did not do that. He said, well, they're free to make those claims, period, which to me was another tell in a moment when he should be trying to sort of close that door if he thought that was something that he could do.
David, your thought on the hearing today?
Look, I think there's two big issues here, right? There's Todd Blanche as a professional, as a person, his character, his integrity. And the second issue is the model that the president has created for his expectations for that office. On the latter, what he has created is, basically to have the Department of Justice as his law firm. That, I think history tells us, is a recipe for disaster. Look at what happened in the Nixon administration, and you have it to some degree, some significant degree, in Bush 43 with Alberto Gonzales. And in both instances, as you recall, Gonzales came out of being essentially the president's lawyer, as Todd was when he was White House counsel. Once you try to co-opt the Justice Department to be the lawyer's law firm, it doesn't do a service to the people of the United States. But most important, as history tells us, it doesn't do the service that the president hopes to get. So it's a big mistake on his part, and time will tell if that's true. With regard to Todd Blanche, look, I've known Todd many, many years. I worked with him. He was a consummate professional. He's very capable. He was a model prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Does he still have those characteristics? That's a big question. A lot of people are asking that. If you buy into this model, which he does, then I think people say, yes, he has a character and integrity to carry out the duties of Attorney General under the model created by President Trump. But the big question is, and I think most lawyers, certainly most former prosecutors and prosecutors, would think that is not the model that they signed on to.
Yeah.